going through some incredible, well, I've been going through some incredible technical difficulties on my end. So hopefully we've got it sorted out and hopefully we are actually live and you guys can actually see us. So if you guys can actually see us, please let us know in the live chats. And look, guys, I appreciate you for joining us. Everybody who's joining us live, thank you very much. Again, I appreciate for being late. Lots of technical difficulties in the back end there. But now that we're here, I'm very happy to be joined by Ahmed Shariff. Ahmed Shariff is a stand-up comedian and he is also a blogger. He's got a podcast that I recently watched and I really enjoy. It's called Chai with Red Pills. And I remember I was watching the video and I've told this to Ahmed before as well. And before I get into the story, first and foremost, welcome to the show, Ahmed.
Thank you for having me on, Sham.
Yeah, so, I'm just going to jump into the story. So I remember that when I was watching your podcast, there was this bit in there where I think it was either Dushyant or it was you, and you guys were talking about something to do with minorities in India or somewhere, and that South Park song starts playing, the South Park song of Cartman, when it's like, all these minorities in my water park. And I was like, man, that is such a great reference. And anybody who understands that reference, especially in India, I have to talk to that guy. So
we just sort of try to appeal to the millennials, fill it up with memes and pop culture references, and I hope people like that.
Yeah, no, well, I enjoyed it. So I technically count as a millennial, so I enjoyed it. So, it was fantastic. And, one of the things that I find very interesting about the sort of discussion, political discussion, cultural discussions in India, and particularly the discussions in India that are dominated by what you would call the cultural political left in India. You see that there is a very sort of rigid mentality. So people are supposed to behave a certain way. And if people do not behave that certain way, then you essentially are declared a pariah and you're sort of kicked out of the in-group and you have to fend for yourself in many ways. So before we dive deep really into it, what I want to talk about is your sort of political development, because watching the podcast, it was quite interesting because your, red pilling, so to say, happened not particularly because of the Indian elections. It happened in the American election cycle and with the, election of Trump. So talk to us a little bit about that because that's fascinating.
Yes, you are right. It did happen because of the American elections. It was 2016. And like the whole world, even I believed that Donald Trump is the most evil thing to have ever walked the earth. May I ask, what was your opinion of Donald Trump at that time? Okay. Were you red-pilled or?
I would be someone who would. So let's look at American left and right. So in American left and right, I would be someone who'd be considered somewhere in the middle because I consider myself socially very liberal on a lot of issues. But I think politically and economically on a couple of things, I would be considered a right-winger. So I would be someone who would be socially a Democrat, but would probably vote Republican. You know what I mean?
That's I'm just asking, what did you think of Donald Trump at that time in 2016?
What I think of Donald Trump? So I thought of Donald Trump in two senses, in an absolute sense and in a relative sense. So in an absolute sense, I actually, when he was running, I was having a great time with it because the guy was just an absolute troll. So how can you not enjoy that? So I was enjoying him being just a complete troll, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, you had Hillary Clinton running, who I just could not stand. I could not stand that lady. I could not stand anything she said. And, most of her policies were pretty much more of the same, which is what I think the American people also did not want. The American people were crying out for a change. And if nothing else, what Trump signified to the people was that, okay, it's change. Things are going to change when Trump comes into power because he does not talk like a politician. He does not behave like a politician. He doesn't care about, all the political way of talking and speaking.
Correctness,
and yeah, nothing. He's just.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's what endeared him to people.
Yeah.
He talks like a troll. Basically, every word of his is like a middle finger to the left, and like people identify with it. People like this sort of guy who's acting like a loudspeaker for their thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's what you enjoyed about it as well, right?
Well, not in 2016 now.
Oh, okay.
I fell for the propaganda, and I believed that he was really a racist, a homophobe, and whatever they called him. And I was scared the day he won the election. It was like, oh damn, what happened? What is going to happen to the world now? Like, we have this madman in charge of the nuclear missile launch buttons, and what's going to happen?
Right.
And then, by chance, I came across one of his interviews, and I saw him talk, and he was so eloquent and sensible, making a lot of sense, and he wasn't at all the monster that the media said he is.
Okay.
And I did a little more research, and after watching that first interview, now this is very critical. I watched a lot of YouTube videos on Marxism, on communism, the failure of communism and socialism, and why we should have unfettered free market capitalism. And now, armed with this knowledge, I watched the first presidential debate.
Right.
It was important that I first watched those YouTube videos. Then, with my knowledge, I watched the presidential debate,
Right.
and I could see it was insane how much sense Donald Trump was making, as opposed to Hillary Clinton, who was, man, she sounded like a clueless beauty pageant contestant.
Right.
I mean, not to insult them, but I mean, you're the leader of the free world. Act like it. She was like, oh, we'll tax people higher and we'll spend it on education and building a better society and flowers and sunshine and rainbows. It was just, I mean, anybody can make this sort of obscure feel-good talk.
Right.
But Trump, on the other hand, he was on point. He was very specific about what he had in mind. And then there were all the allegations against him.
Right.
That he called Mexicans rapists. I saw the entire interview. Again, that one statement was taken out of context.
Right.
And then there was the infamous man. This was probably the biggest news piece. That he made fun of a disabled journalist with that hand gesture. That again was proven to be false. That's something he's been doing for years.
Right. And what I really enjoyed about it as well, was that he was somebody that openly, well, it's up for debate, how he's acted since, but this was a guy who was openly saying that, America has for too long been involved in these interventionist wars.
Exactly,
and,
yes.
And America doesn't need to be the world's police. We need to stop going out there and overthrowing governments and trying to install democracy in places where it just doesn't work out for us. So that was something that I was like, wow, this guy's coming out and openly speaking up against that,
that is what converted.
Complex.
That is what converted me, those exact words.
Oh,
Been
wow.
trying to find that interview forever and somehow not able to locate it.
Right. So you went through that whole stage, when you started to sort of do your own deep dive and you started to understand, okay, there is another point of view here which we need to listen to, right?
You need to listen to the other side always.
Right.
Listen to both sides and reach a conclusion.
Right. So what was the conclusion that you came to?
That the media lied.
Right.
I mean, see, smear campaigns happen using the media and everything, smear campaigns, but this is one that really sort of went out of hand. Putting it lightly.
Yeah.
I mean, lying on such a colossal scale, this level of deception, that was quite a shock. It's like discovering I was living in the Matrix, It was a lot to take in.
Right.
And then what was even more disturbing was the reaction of the people around me when I showed it to them. It was like, guys, I think we have been fooled. And then the name calling started, racist, homophobe, sexist, this is, that phobe, the left being the left. I mean, this is the truth, guys. Look at it. You can see the videos for yourself. It's right there in front of your eyes. But still, these people are so thick-skulled. I don't know what goes on in their heads. It's crazy.
Right. So from sort of getting, red pill, sort of understanding that there's two sides to every story, and understanding that the media tends to lie. How did that translate for you from like an American election point of view or an American political point of view to India? Because, in India, I would say the situation's quite similar. The media tends to lean a certain way quite heavily, and the sort of civil society, pop culture tends to lean certain way quite heavily. So there is also that same stigma with people, with like, okay, if you do not agree with this ideology, then that makes you a bad person. So how did that translate for you from like that whole Trump phenomenon to coming around to your red pilling in sort of the Indian sense?
See, Modi is India's Trump. Simply
You
put.
think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he's not a perfect human being, and neither is Donald Trump.
Sure.
But he's just not the monster the media makes him out to be.
Right.
And you saw my entire podcast. We saw how he investigated fake news and how
Yes.
something happens anywhere in some corner of some village. Somehow Modi is responsible for that. Hey, but we launched an anti-satellite missile. Modi is not responsible for that somehow. Like, what is this selective bias? So yes, there is a lot of vilification, a lot of fake news. Also, how you live in Chicago, right?
Yes.
And how in the US there is this sort of vilification of whites. You have white privilege.
Yeah.
Here in India, you don't have whites. You have what? Brahmins.
Yeah.
So they're basically copy-pasting the same exact script. You hate on whites, here hate on Brahmins. Hate on males, same. And male privilege, yeah. And what else then? Christians, Catholics, here you hate on Hindus.
Yeah.
And who are the victims over here? Blacks, Mexicans, here it's Dalits and Muslims.
Yeah.
Look at me, do I look like a victim? I mean, I've been living in this country for 20 plus years. Everything's fine, man. I mean, yeah, there is a little bit of intolerance, but it's so minor. I mean, the impression that the media gives you that they're knocking at our doors at midnight and the Gestapo is dragging us away to concentration camps. No, that's just a load of bull.
Yeah, and there are interesting parallels, and it kind of almost makes you think that the left in India doesn't really have any original thought of its own. It doesn't do any original thinking of its own.
No, they're
It
sheep.
just says,
They're sheep.
either what's happening here over here in the US, let's take this exact formula, copy paste it on India, and we'll say, acha, we'll just replace the words. We'll just say blacks and Mexicans is, Dalits and Christians, Dalits and Muslims and Christians and so on, and we'll just sort of use the exact same format, and it just shows you the sort of lack of nuanced thinking that happens here, and the level of demonization that happens as well. And I think that's a real shame, and I think that's very dishonest. And I wonder, in your personal experience, how do you see it? Because I know that what's happened with you has been very interesting, because you wrote a article on Op India which went quite viral, saying that you're not a victim, you don't live your life like a victim, you don't see yourself as a victim, and you're fully capable of thinking for yourself. You don't have to fall into any kind of groupthink, and you're fully capable of thinking of yourself as an individual and living your life as an individual. And
Yes.
when you just hear what I said right now, anybody who listens to it is like, yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. A person should have the ability to think for themselves and live according to their own principles and their own life philosophy. But what's crazy to me is the level of hatred that sort of came towards you. And there were people on Facebook. There's some group on Facebook that was calling you all sorts of names. There were people that were abusing you, attacking you, kind of almost.
They've given up
like
now. They've given up now.
Yeah, I'm sure they have, because how long can you abuse someone for? But like, it was almost like, when it was kind of like, when you have like somebody who's black but votes Republican in like America, they call them a race traitor. They
Uncle
say,
Tom.
They call them an Uncle Tom.
Uncle
They call them
Tom.
a porch monkey. They say, oh, this guy is a race
Kanye
traitor.
West. Kanye
Yeah.
West.
Exactly. And I almost saw that there was something similar to those kind of slurs being aimed towards you. So did you expect that to happen, or was that something that was surprising to you?
No, I mean, of course, there is a very strong anti-Modi sentiment over here. I did expect people to hate on me.
Sure.
But hey, I learned some interesting new epithets, man. I've been called a Sanghi,
Yeah.
Sarkari Musalman.
Wow,
Kanye-
that's a new one. I've never heard that.
Yeah, even I've never heard. Kanye West.
Kanye West.
Yeah,
That's
Kanye West.
great.
Look at me.
Yeah.
Sasta Imam Tawhidi.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually clever. I mean, that's clever. Well done to whoever did that. Holy crap, man. There's some. Was there any more?
No, I think that's it. I'll tell you more if I remember.
Wow.
But yeah, point is, people hate on you. People really judge you when you call yourself a right winger. Because one more thing, Sham, the thing is, in India, right wing kind of doesn't have a good name.
Yeah.
Because in the US, you have your intellectuals like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, and you have a very well established scene there. My red pilling happened by watching YouTubers, Western YouTubers like Paul Joseph Watson and Mark Dice, Stephen Crowder, Lauren Southern, Faith Gold, Stefan Molyneux. But who do we have in India?
Yeah.
We are learning from these pioneers, and we are trying to build a strong classical liberal, I would say, infrastructure over here. Because I'm still sort of reluctant to use the word right wing.
Sure.
Because people really judge you.
Yeah, and we can come into the whole discussion of whether or not India even has a proper right wing, because I don't even think that India has a proper right wing developed really, right?
Not really, no.
Yeah, I mean,
even the current government, they say that it's a right wing government, but I feel it's not right wing enough.
Yeah.
I mean, they are politicians, man. They're doing what they have to do. They will not shy away from giving socialist handouts when it helps their cause.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, a lot of the policies that's the interesting thing about sort of the BJP government and Modi, I feel like as well, is because if you look at some of the policies that the Modi government has brought in, you look at something like Ayushman Bharat, which is sounds very similar to Medicare for all. And you think of something like the financial inclusion schemes like Mudra, like Jan Dhan Yojana, and giving LPG to poor families, and all of those schemes that you see that are considered, flagship schemes of the Modi government. If you take Narendra Modi out of these schemes, and if you say Arvind Kejriwal, for example, got these schemes in, these schemes would be hailed as fantastic, wonderful schemes that are aiming at financial inclusion. Because these schemes are basically very sort of schemes that the left would enjoy. But because Modi is the one that came out with the schemes, these schemes are bad.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
I think they actually conducted this social experiment in the US, Mark Dice or someone, where they went around with a sheet of paper. They read out these policies. So the government has done this, estate tax has been removed, so and so. I don't remember what exactly they were. And all these millennials, these college students, they were like, wow, that's really good, that's excellent. And in the end, they gave the punchline. This was all Donald Trump's idea.
Right. What was their reaction? What was their reaction?
They're like, oh, really? Oh, I mean, you could see the regret on their face.
Yeah.
You can't say no to that now.
Yeah.
But
it's such an incredible thing that something like this, good policies become bad policies just because you don't like the person that's associated with those good policies.
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson also said this on the Stephen Colbert show.
Oh, really?
Just because they asked him about Space Force. So Donald Trump is creating this crazy new thing, Space Force. What do you think about it? And he was like, just because it's coming out of Donald Trump's mouth doesn't make it a crazy idea.
Yeah.
And then Neil deGrasse Tyson, being the scientist that he is, went on to explain very well what the Space Force is and everything, and then convince people that it is a good idea indeed, Space Force.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think, I wanted to actually ask you, you're a stand-up comedian, and being in the stand-up sort of circle, stand-up in general tends to be, well, at least the stand-up that I've heard, and maybe I haven't heard a lot of Indian-based stand-up, but the ones that the amount of stand-up that I heard tends to be quite liberal-leaning, left-leaning. So
yes.
With you and your convictions, and as outspoken as you are on social media and publicly about your convictions, what has been like, have you felt any pushback from the stand-up community?
Yeah, of course, big time.
Oh, really? So is that something that they say to you? Is that something that you hear, or what happens?
Oh, they hate me for it. They absolutely hate me.
Really?
For my views, my right-leaning classical liberal views.
Right.
Because these people are just sheep. They're just following some weird rules which I really don't agree with. I mean, this is not what I signed up for. I started stand-up in like 2011. The deal was simple. You just tell jokes. If you make some money, good. You hang out for a while if you feel like, and you go home. That's it. You're a comedian and you tell jokes. But now they want me to join their cult.
Yeah.
And they have some really, really insane beliefs like this fourth, fifth wave feminism.
Oh my God.
And this weird far left concepts like gender fluidity. What is all this nonsense? I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
I'm just here to tell my jokes, do my job, and go home. Who I vote for, my religious beliefs or the lack of them, what I think of LGBTQ or Modi or Rahul Gandhi, that's none of anybody's business.
Yeah.
Boundaries, people, boundaries.
Yeah.
I don't want to join your cult.
Yeah, and it's interesting, talking about stand-up. It's so interesting because this is a phenomenon, again, that I feel like that's coming to India from the United States. In the US, we see that their stand-up comedians have become incredibly political. And in the US, a lot of millennials, a lot of people our age are almost exclusively getting their news from stand-up comedians. And that's not necessarily a good thing in my opinion, because stand-up comedians can have it both ways, because they'll come out and do a show about politics and they'll make certain claims and say certain things. And if you question those claims, then they'll come out and say, "Arey, why are you taking stand-up so seriously, man? It's a comedy show, calm down." But at the other end, they also come out and say that, no, we're talking about serious issues and we're serious thinkers. And it's percolating down into India as well, where I feel like quite a big chunk of stand-up comedy has become very strongly political, and a lot of stand-up comics, almost do exclusively political content. Do you feel that way as well?
Yeah, Hassan Minhaj.
Yeah, right. So that's
Hassan Minhaj and all your late night talk show hosts in the US, Stephen Colbert, Bill Maher, all of them. Comedians here are sort of emulating them, copying them.
Yeah.
Right-wing bashing has become literally a multi-million-dollar business, and yet these people cannot shut up about how there's no freedom of expression. Come on, how can you say that? I mean, you put up a stand-up video criticizing the government for not giving you freedom of speech, and then it gets millions of views and thousands of shares. Isn't that sort of self-defeating, self-contradictory?
Yeah.
And my resentment with the liberal scene started because of this wonderful thing called feminism.
Let's get into that then.
Oh yeah, early 2016 is when the Indian stand-up scene started going to shit.
Right. Because
overnight everybody became feminists all of a sudden, just because one prominent comedian put out a video about feminism. Everybody turned feminist because they wanted to sort of kiss up to him, not necessarily because they believed in that philosophy.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm 33 years old. On average, I'm like 5 or 6 years older than all of these comedians. Most of them are in their mid-20s.
Right.
I had a negative experience with feminists way back in 2011.
Right.
So I knew what they were getting into, and I wasn't too happy about it.
Right.
I of course started trolling on all these things. I started speaking out against it, and I got a lot of hate. And to be fair, I was a little extra. I was a bit of a troll. I deliberately used to provoke them.
Right.
I was influenced by Milo Yiannopoulos.
Yeah.
Who in retrospect I think was a bad influence. I mean, where is freedom of expression? You're supposed to joke about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Suddenly, feminists and LGBTQs, you can't joke about them. Can't joke about them. Who do these people think they are? Muslims?
Yeah.
Why can't we joke about them?
Exactly.
I used to put out jokes and memes. I didn't care about anybody, and yeah, so that's how it started.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That you have comedy on the one hand where lampooning a certain group of people is considered almost like a virtuous thing. It's considered a good thing that, comedy should always target these people. These people are horrible people, and so making fun of these people is a good thing. So on the one hand, you have comedians almost as a duty. They say, I consider it my comedic duty to go after these people. So you can go after these people, but then certain other groups are absolutely off limits. Why is that? Okay, I feel like if you create conditions like that you can make jokes about this, but not about this. You can make jokes about this, but not about this. That really hurts comedy. And I'm not a comedian, but I feel like, that really hurts comedy. I feel like the best stand-up comedians are people who don't really give a crap. about what
Andrew
other people
Schultz.
think.
Andrew Schultz. Have you heard of this new guy?
You know, you suggested it to me when we were speaking on the phone the other day, and I actually went and heard his podcast with Joe Rogan, and it was pretty good. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So, like I told you that before as well. You know, one of my favorite stand-up comedians of all time is Bill Burr. And I feel like Bill Burr's in a position where Bill Burr has absolutely mastered the art of not giving a shit about what people think, which is why I think his comedy is so good. Because he doesn't care. He doesn't care about what anybody says to him. The thing is that there's a difference between not caring what people think and being an asshole. You know?
Yeah.
So Bill Burr is just a person who doesn't care about what people think, and that really makes his comedy so much better. As opposed to people that come on stage and then give the audience lectures about what.
Lectures, I know.
You know?
I mean, I don't need this snot-faced 25-year-old fetus lecturing me on how to live my life.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you're just fresh out of college. Just do your WhatsApp jokes, family WhatsApp group jokes, and about your sex life or whatever, and just go home, okay? Don't tell me how to run my life.
Yeah.
You still have a lot to live. You don't have nuance. You don't have the wisdom. Just leave it to the older guys.
Yeah, I agree.
And, this one friend of mine put it in a very good way. This PC police. First they came after violence in movies.
Yeah.
They were asked to get lost. Then they went after the gamers, the whole Gamergate thing.
Yeah.
They were asked to get lost. Then they came for stand-up comedians. Stand-up comedians embraced and welcomed them.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we are kindred spirits, we are the same. So the stand-up comedians, they actually firmly believe in all this far-left liberal bullcrap.
Yeah.
And that is why they sort of protect those beliefs. That is why you cannot joke on them, cannot make light of those things. And I've heard from quite a few comedians that this has affected Indian stand-up comedy. The quality has gone down because, you know, there's a sort of mental block. Who are comedians who work with this liberal gang, they're not allowed to speak their mind. They have to think 10 times before writing anything. Yeah. Will people judge me for it? Is this sexist? Is this racist? Is this homophobic? And that is sort of really limiting them. As opposed to someone like Bill Burr or Andrew Schultz, who just let go.
Yeah.
And we love them for it. Yeah.
Exactly. I remember, I don't know if you were aware of this, but a few weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, Louis C.K. came back and performed like a set at some comedy show.
Yeah.
You see that?
Yes.
Performed a set at some comedy show. And what he was doing apparently, and you know, this is separate from the discussion about what Louis C.K. did. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about Louis C.K.'s comedy right now. So he came on and he did a set somewhere where he was apparently practicing a set at a comedy store. And what some guy did, some person recorded it when he was practicing his set. Some person recorded it and put it on like social media and said that, oh, Louis C.K. is basically like a far-right comedian now. It's like a far-right fascist now. Because he was making jokes about like how millennials are too soft. They like get upset about everything. So they said, okay, Louis C.K. is now a far-right fascist. So there's two things there. First of all, now I don't know if you've noticed that you're more in touch with the stand-up scene. So first of all, this was a guy who was not performing an actual act. He was just practicing his set. He was in a comedy club just practicing. He hadn't finished it. So you weren't even watching the finished product over there. So you recorded something which was not a finished product, which you're not supposed to do, first of all.
Regardless of that, you can still see his views in that, finished or unfinished.
Sure.
So that's what counts.
Sure. You can still see his views in that, but at the end of it's also not finished yet. But so you've done that. And secondly, this is a guy who's just like making fun of like some millennials being a little bit too soft. And you call that a far-right perspective? How is that a far-right perspective in any way? Saying that people have become soft. I don't understand that. Do you think that's a far-right perspective in any way?
Because he dared to criticize one of the holy cows of the far left. Yeah. He talked about this new crazy fad, this gender non-conforming bullcrap. You heard of this? he made fun of that. He was like, these millennials, they're so sharp. I like to be referred to as they, them. He made fun of that, and that is unacceptable. Yeah. How dare you?
Yeah.
Who else do you know, Sham, who gets really pissy when you make fun, when you make jokes about them?
I know. I can think of some.
Who could it be?
Yeah, I can think of a
Let's
few
not go
people.
there.
we'll,
Let's not go there. We
we'll,
want to
we'll,
stay alive.
we'll skim over that topic briefly a
Okay.
little bit later, but yeah, I think it's I just find that whole thing just absolutely insane for going after people for expressing an opinion that is slightly different from yours. In fact, I was reading a book recently called Coddling of the American Mind, and I would really recommend that book to people who have not read it. And
Okay.
it sort of talks about how in universities in America, since like 2012, 2013, you've
Hmm.
seen a new generation of students come in. And this generation of students, they're called iGen because they're the generation after the millennials, right after the millennials. So these are the kids. So millennials had part of their life where they did not grow up with any internet. But
Hmm.
iGen completely grew up with the internet. They have had internet their whole lives. So this iGen who's come in is the generation that is not spending as much time socializing with other people because they have the internet. So they spend their times on the internet. They're usually from middle to upper middle income backgrounds. So,
Yeah.
they have everything they want. They've never had any scarcity, any problems. And their parents always keep them very sheltered. And so they're coming from a sheltered background. They're coming from a background where they have not had a lot of social interaction, right? They usually interact with other people on the internet. And so they have not really been out in the real world. I moved out of my house when I was 16. So these people have not had any real social interactions. They have not had to deal with the real world. So then they go from school where they're living with their parents completely sheltered into university where they're away from their parents and where the real world is. And the real
Hmm.
world is not like your parents' house, by the way. So they go into the
Uh,
real world and they're like, wow, people are saying whatever
just,
they
just,
want to me.
just,
Sure.
uh, did you equate university with real world?
I
Because that's not what I heard. Because I heard real world comes after the university. Because
right.
university is another indoctrination center,
That's
is
right.
my understanding.
That's right. I mean, the problem is that in the 60s you had places like um, Berkeley University in California that were at the forefront of the free
Hmm.
speech movement, right?
Hmm.
And they were fighting for free speech. They were saying that anything goes. People should be able to say what's on their minds. So these were the
Hmm.
universities that were fighting for free speech. And now you have universities where they're saying, okay, speech is violence. Like if you speak,
UC Berkeley, the very same university.
it's very
What
same
happened
university,
within 50 years? Yes.
right?
I think they violently blocked Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos from speaking at their campus. Riots
Exactly.
happened, right? They had to call in police and there were fires and people attacked. And is this the same place?
Exactly. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, you go from saying free speech is an absolute right that everybody should have to saying speech is violence. Now, speech is not violence. Okay, even if it's horrible speech, even if somebody is abusing you, it is not the same thing as being punched in the face. All right, if you have ever been punched in the face, you know that it's very different from being abused. So,
Hmm.
speech is not violence, and secondly, the crazy thing is that what I've seen here, and what I'm seeing sort of in the left in India as well, is that they're using the pretext of speech being violence to now physically attack people who do not agree with them, and that's a dangerous thing.
It's not that bad in India yet, but it will if you don't stop it.
Yeah, I feel like it will be simply because I went to university in Delhi University. I went to DU. So DU
Hmm.
is like the hub of this little bit of liberal nonsense these days. I went to Hindu college, and right across the street from me, I don't know if you're familiar with DU, but right across the street from me
I've heard of
was,
you, yeah.
yeah, so right across the street from me was St. Stephen's. So St. Stephen's is this really like old prestigious English medium college, and all the kids there are usually from sort of upper middle income families, and that's one of the hubs of this kind of nonsense, that speech is violence and that you should not be speaking what's on your mind and all that nonsense. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I find that pretense very dangerous. And when I look at these Antifa people beating people up on the streets, they're saying ki, acha, if you're speaking, then basically you're causing violence, so then we're justified in causing violence against you, right? That's what they're kind of saying.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, dude, you guys sit in your houses all day long, post on YouTube, then put on a black mask and hit people who are protesting peacefully. Do you understand who you're messing with? You're messing with these crazy rural folk from middle America. And these people are these Second Amendment folks, all right? What happens if they go home after you hit them and they come back with their guns? What are you going to do? So
Yes, Donald Trump spoke about this exact thing at a speech.
Right?
It
What
was
did
like,
he say?
thank goodness, thank God we are peaceful people. Otherwise, these people don't stand a chance.
No, they won't. And that's the part that they don't understand. Is that if you are responding to speech with violence, what happens when they respond to violence with their own violence? What happens then?
They should thank their stars that conservatives, right wingers are not violent.
Yeah.
These people get the impression that they are in power just because they're so vocal in the media and arts and everything. But the real power lies in the hand of the voters.
Right.
And they proved their power. Trump won. Yahoo.
Yeah, I know. And so, okay, so let's shift track a little bit. And so let's talk about, there was something that you said, you were on a podcast with Kushal Mehra on the Charvaka podcast as well.
Yeah.
And there was something that you said which I found very profound, which, you know, you don't really hear a lot coming from, you know, urban, well-educated, mainstream people of the society like yourself. And you were talking about, you know, the attitude that some Muslims have in India and some of the beliefs that they have, which might be considered antithetical to a democratic society. And
Yes.
it's when I hear that, it's kind of crazy to me because you don't hear that at all in any logical discussion, much less coming from, you know, a Muslim himself. So let me ask you this first, like, did you grow up in a conservative household or did you grow up in like a liberal household where this idea was sort of put in, or, you know, where you got this idea from your parents, or did you develop it on your own more or less?
Conservative. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, man. The motherlode of conservative. Yeah.
Whoa, how do you go from Saudi Arabia to this, man? That's crazy.
We had to come back to India,
Sure.
you know, because India is such a terrible place for Muslims and we love the fascist leaders here. We had to come back to our home country.
Yeah. And so sorry. So you grew up in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And how old were you when you moved back to India?
11 or 12 years old.
Okay, so that's still
So-
pretty young.
Living in the birthplace of Islam, I know a little more about Islam and Muslims than the average Indian.
Sure.
And what did you want to know?
So what I was kind of wanting to know was, so you grew up in a conservative area, in a very conservative country, then you moved to India. How do you go
Slightly
from,
less conservative, yeah.
right, and how do you, so was your family a conservative?
They still are.
Okay. So
But
growing
then
up
again, these are sort of subjective terms.
sure.
We are considered pretty liberal.
Okay.
For some people, we might be conservative, but you know what I mean.
Sure. No, I understand that. So you come from a conservative place. You grew up in a relatively, let's say, conservative family. So
Yeah.
what was that journey that you had intellectually where you're like, you know, that certain things within my community's cultural beliefs need to be altered in order to fit properly with a democratic setup?
Like for example, India is obviously more of a non-Muslim country, and there are many things the non-Muslims do here which might not be palatable to practicing Orthodox Muslims, like the fact that alcohol is freely available here, non-halal meats are available, and the fact that women don't always cover up in burqas. Now, a Muslim might be a little bit offended by those things, but hey, we are living here. We should put up with this. These are those people's views. I mean, you can try enforcing that, but there will be resistance from the non-Muslims. And if you don't like this place, if you don't like all that's happening here, okay, this is the part where I sound like a Sanghi. Go to Pakistan.
Right.
Go to Pakistan. It's like a haven for Muslims. Why not go
Right.
there? Why not go to Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or one of those where we have like 60 plus Muslim countries on earth? But if you live in India, you have to respect the freedom of people here and you have to put up with some stuff.
What's interesting to me is that whole, you know, the Saudi Arabia loves to talk about Ummah and some of the more Radical Muslims say that Ummah first and country second. But
yes.
right, and what is interesting to me is that when you go to Saudi Arabia and you look at the way a lot of Indian Muslims and a lot of Pakistani Muslims are treated in Saudi Arabia, I mean, it's incredible. I heard that I saw a report where around almost like 400, 500 Pakistani Muslims had been executed in Saudi Arabia or jailed in Saudi Arabia without any kind of trial whatsoever.
No, I wouldn't say that's true because living there,
right,
I used to see Pakistanis and a lot of drug smugglers. A lot.
Oh.
Every week a Pakistani used to get caught over there.
Oh wow, okay. So
I mean not to hate
not
to hate on Pakistanis,
sure,
but
sure.
I'm just saying what used to happen there. This is a fact.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
And drug smuggling is punishable by death over there.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
And,
okay, well there you go.
And since you talked about how Muslims are treated in Saudi Arabia, let me tell you, Saudi Arabia doesn't necessarily represent Islam.
Okay.
I don't feel they're really going by the book.
Okay.
For example, they have a rule against women driving. Women are not allowed to drive. What the heck? How does that make sense?
Right.
Because Islamic rules were framed in the 6th or 7th century. How could anyone have passed a law about driving back then?
Yeah.
This is something they made up.
Yeah. But do you think that it sort of comes from the morality rules surrounding women? That, women have a certain role in Islamic society. They have the role of being a mother, a wife, a childbearer, and taking care of the household. And other than that, not really much else. So do you think that the whole women should not be driving comes from that morality code?
I don't know where it comes from. It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And by the way, Islam does not forbid women from working.
Sure.
Because the Prophet Muhammad's wife, his first wife, Khadija radiallahu anha, she herself was a working woman. And she was in fact richer than him. Technically, in modern times, she was his senior. And he did seem to have a problem with that. So why do these modern Saudis have a problem with women working and driving or whatever? I mean, if you want to draw a parallel, was there a law against women riding horses or camels back in Arabia then?
Right.
I don't think so now. So I don't know where these people are getting this from.
Right. Interesting. So in terms of, coming to India, in terms of like there's this concept that we talk about very often in India these days about the difference between tolerance and mutual respect. What the West has developed, in a sense, they have developed the concept of tolerance, where they're like, okay, we're going to tolerate you. We're going to spend our entire lives thinking that you are wrong. You're going to burn in hell, and your life choices are horrible. And we're going to try and convert you from your horrible life choices. But we'll tolerate you. We won't kill you if we see you. And I still think that is not a complete concept, and that concept sort of derives from that Abrahamic setup where there's one way or the highway. You know what I mean? And so to develop the idea of mutual respect, which in my opinion is a more complete idea, and it's a more sort of Indian cultural related idea. It's a more dharmic idea where we see each other's culture, we see each other's ideas, we debate each other's ideas, we give each other's idea the amount of respect that it deserves enough to debate it. And if in a debate of ideas, your idea or my idea fails the test of reason, then we get rid of that idea. That's the kind of world that I think we should live in. How can we, with the sort of restrictions that are applied on Abrahamic religions, how can we get to a setup like that, do you think?
No, Abrahamic religions by their very nature are uncompromising.
Right.
So that cannot happen. So tolerance, what you talked about, that is the best thing we can hope for.
Right.
Like practicing Muslims firmly believe, and there's no changing this. There's no convincing a practicing Muslim that your religion, your idea is better. Because like you said, it's the highway, my religion is the best.
Right.
So best thing we can hope for is tolerance.
Okay.
And you talked about it yourself in one of your podcasts, the concept of shirk, which is an unforgivable sin.
Yeah.
So non-Muslims are sort of looked down upon as inferior creatures, and they're not really hated on. I mean, some radicals might hate them.
Sure.
but more from a look of concern. Like these people are arrested, they're worshipping the wrong god. They could go to hell for this. We should help them. We should bring to the right path.
Yeah.
So it's more sort of a benevolent approach. But some radicals, they actually get violent towards these people because they hate them.
Right. Yeah, and that's the sort of attitude that I see in like Christian circles a lot more. Is not outright hatred, but rather like concern. Like I remember.
Let us help you. Let us help you. Let us help you find Jesus or Muhammad or.
So I lived in I lived in New Zealand for a couple of years, and when I was in New Zealand, I used to meet a lot of people who would say to me, who would find out that I was from India and then I was a Hindu, and they would say, "Oh my," they'll almost get that look of like pity on their faces, like, "Oh my poor boy, let me help you, let me help you get out of this horrible situation that you're in, and let me guide you on the right path." And I was like, I'm all right, ma'am, thank you. So, and
because you don't have that sort of Hindu guilt.
Yeah.
That most of these liberals have.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't expect to see you holding a placard anytime saying, "I'm ashamed to be this."
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't understand this concept of forced conversions.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, guy might just say that they say this thing, Hidayat Allah ke haath mein hai. Like he will get Iman, he will become a believing Muslim if Allah decides. But here, you're cheating. I mean, the guy will say anything at gunpoint or sword point to save his life.
Yeah.
So that's I don't see how that's counted as a conversion.
Because when you say that whole Hidayat Allah ke haath mein hai, it's a great concept, but at the same time, I think it like conflicts with the other concept when you're saying that this is the only true path and there's no other true paths, and the people who follow any other paths are probably going to go to hell. Then you're like, okay, well,
not probably, definitely.
Oh yeah, so definitely going to go to hell.
Just being honest, man, the belief is what it is.
Sure. No, and I appreciate the honesty. So, and it sort of really conflicts with each other. These 2 points of view really conflict with each other. And then there's also the concept of, that the world needs to hear the good news. The Christians say that the world needs to hear the good news. And in the Bible, it says that what is my life if I'm not spreading the good news? So there's also the concept of that not only is what other people believing wrong, but it is also your religious duty to get those people onto the correct path. So
onto the correct path.
Right. So that's the
Sirat al-Mustaqim, we call it in Arabic.
What is it called?
Sirat al-Mustaqim, the right path.
Interesting. So yeah, so that's what I'm sort of, that's the part I feel like Indian society has to come to navigate in the future, which is how do we create a situation where we can create an idea or create an atmosphere of mutual respect and sort of debating these ideas openly. That, I feel like when you're living in a society, you said something about free speech a little while ago, about how important free speech and free discussion of ideas, in the sort of free market of ideas is so important. And when you have ideas in any society that are considered above any sort of discussion or beyond any sort of critique or discussion, that creates danger in a society. And I feel like every idea should be up for, it's okay to be able to discuss ideas, just like stand-up comedy. It's okay to be able to make fun of things that you want to make fun of, and it's okay to be able to discuss ideas that you think do not conform with democratic values. So,
no, but the thing is, some of your ideas, they might be in direct contradiction to someone's religion, to someone's beliefs, and they will not be okay with that. So what I feel, as responsible citizens, we should be knowledgeable, we should be aware of those boundaries, and be careful not to cross their boundaries.
Okay.
I mean, the narrative is that I, being a Muslim, I'm supposed to be scared of Hindus and Brahmins and all that.
Yeah.
I hang out all the time with these RSS people, hardcore, what you call Kattar Hindus. Do I get in trouble?
Yeah.
Because I know the boundaries. I think it all comes down to social skills.
Right.
Like, don't just say certain things in front of them. They don't say certain things in front of me. And we can get along fine. And a failure to understand this is being seen in Europe.
Right.
I've spoken about this even in my podcast. I'll just run by that again. Like they're being very pro-Islamic, like against Islamophobia, like we should get Muslims, tolerance and all that. But I don't think any of these people bothered to study Islam and find out that it is fundamentally incompatible with Western societies. Because Islam is a life of submission, of slavery to God, of piety, of sacrifice. It's basically a test to see how well you fare in this life and if you qualify for heaven. Europeans, they have the exact opposite approach. They're all about life, living life to the maximum, the fullest. They're all about wine and women and dancing and especially this issue of LGBTQs, which has become a hot button topic right now in the UK.
Right.
Muslims are hardcore against LGBTQ. And these people, the Europeans, I mean, none of them bothered to check this. None of them bothered to read up on Islam. And you saw that school in, I believe, Birmingham, I think. About 400 Muslim students.
Families are protesting, right, against LGBTQ education.
They banned against it. See, this is what happens because of ignorance, when you don't know the boundaries. Conflict.
But do you think that, that's a very good point that you raised, it's a very interesting discussion as well, because do you think that in the UK that British society should acquiesce to these demands and say, okay, we're not going to teach about LGBTQ people in schools, or it's okay, because I think it's okay to be able to be taught about these things. It's okay to say that LGBTQ people are good and straight people. It's not okay to say that LGBTQ people are good and straight people are bad, which is what some people do. Some people in the left say that if you're a heterosexual, I remember there was this YouTuber that said somewhere like, if you don't want to have sex with trans people, then you're homophobic, then you're transphobic. Which I'm like, come on, man, just can you stop being an idiot, please?
Yeah, was it that thin, long, blonde-haired guy?
Yes.
I forgot his name. I know him.
Yes.
I know
and I'm just like, come on, that's sheer stupidity. That's what that is. You're just being stupid at this point. So that's
Screw you, dude. I'm not gonna have sex with you. No way. Right? Stop trying to sell yourself. Not into that
exactly. Shit. And that's just absolutely silly, trying to push that. But educating kids about, LGBT people, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for people to know about LGBT people and not have that sort of bias, because some people are genuinely biased against LGBT people, and it's okay. And, it happens. So teaching them about that is not necessarily a bad thing, right? So do you think that British society should necessarily acquiesce to these demands that, if the Muslims say that we don't want schools to teach about LGBTQ people, will back off? Do you think that British society should be backing off?
Do you feel that these people were teaching about LGBTQ in an objective manner?
That's a good question. I do not know. I would take them on good faith, but I don't know the answer to that question.
I would say definitely no. They are trying to push the idea that LGBTQ people are good, there's nothing wrong with it, which flies in the face of Islam.
Right.
That's why people had a problem with it. But you cannot teach this to our kids. Because if you've seen my podcast, I've also quoted verses from the Quran and the Bible, where the prophet, the biblical prophet Lot, in Islam known as Lut alayhi salam, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah,
right,
where Sodom is looked down upon as a sin in the eyes of God, in the eyes of the Muslim God and in the eyes of the Christian God.
Right.
So of course Muslims are not okay with it because it's clearly mentioned in the Quran. It's not like some mullah is misinterpreting the text and all that. No, you can see it for yourself. You can read the translation. It's forbidden, and of course Muslims will not take it.
Right. Right. Yeah, it is an interesting one, isn't it? So
this is just one of many incompatibility issues.
And that's what makes it tricky. And there's some questions in here as well. And I was going to ask the question myself, like, what do you see as, just yourself, and what do you see as a sort of future Indian society if we're trying to resolve these kinds of conflicts of incompatibility that we have? Do you see a future society as just a society where we discuss some issues but leave some other issues alone? Is that a healthy way? Or do you think a future society would be where we're able to discuss all these ideas freely, just like we're able to joke about all topics freely?
Since you're a South Park fan, you remember this one episode where they're so far ahead in the future, these people, that there is no race anymore. Everyone has sort of interbred,
Yeah.
and they're now all beige.
Yes.
They're all beige. They're all the same. They all speak the same language. They all look the same.
Yes.
I think humanity one day will evolve to that point.
Oh, you think?
We'll all sort of just become one big monoculture.
Right.
But until then, differences exist, conflict exists. Let us be responsible, let us be wise, let us be aware of each other's boundaries, and just be careful up till that point. Let's tolerate each other, true tolerance.
Okay.
And let's hope things work out. And you're talking about the future. In the immediate future, I would say, if Modi doesn't win, we're all screwed. Please, Modi ji, win somehow. Save us from that madman.
Yeah, I mean, did you get a chance to look at the Congress Manifesto?
Oh no, I've been wanting to look at it, just didn't get time.
Dude, there's crazy shit in that manifesto, because there's like, we were just having a discussion about comedy, and comedy not necessarily having boundaries, and it's okay to make fun of things that people find uncomfortable or controversial. So the Congress has a rule which is basically now saying, Congress has a item in their manifesto which is basically now saying that they're going to enact regulation to take care of hate speech on the internet. So basically, and the definition of hate speech is not given. So
who gets to decide that? Who gets to decide that?
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, hate speech is whatever the Congress party wants it to be. Hate speech is, if you call Rahul Gandhi Pappu, that could be hate speech. If you call Sonia Gandhi Sonia Maino, that could be hate speech. So basically anything could be hate speech. So you can be sent to jail for 3 years if what you have said on the internet is construed to be hate speech by the Congress party. And that kind of nonsense scares me. So yeah, for that reason alone, I'm like, guys, do the right thing, India.
This is in the manifesto.
This is in the manifesto.
Holy crap, that is scary.
It
That
is
is scary.
It is scary.
On the other hand,
Sure.
on the other hand, the current government, which is accused of being fascist,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard of Kanhaiya Kumar.
Mm-hmm.
He was jailed for a while and he was released. And on the day of release, he makes a speech berating Modi and the BJP government, which was nationally televised.
Yeah.
That happened. Nobody has the right to say after that there is no freedom of speech in the country. If he can get away with that, if he's a free man walking, there is freedom of speech in this country.
Yeah.
I've been criticizing Modi for years. Nothing happened to me. In fact, I can make a YouTube video right now calling Modi my leader all sorts of names, accusing him of all sorts of stuff. Nothing will happen to me.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question from Jason Grace. Just take a couple of questions before we wrap up. So there's a question from Jason Grace. It says, question for Ahmed. Is Modi's entrance, according to Ahmed, a small part of a larger movement across India, embracing populism and right-wing ideology, or do you think it's just a country sort of expressing the other point of view finally?
No, what he said is true.
Okay.
You know what you hear these days, Hindu jag chuka hai. See, man, the thing is, yes, we will begin to see more sort of a resurgence of Indian culture,
Sure.
which is a good thing, because, see, the British left forever ago, but the psychological damage that they've left on Indians, I mean, just how sinister this whole thing is, I'm beginning to realize it now. Man, they've completely broken Indians. They have broken Indians. Have you ever seen a Muslim hold up a placard and say, hey, I'm ashamed to be Muslim? Neither have I.
Exactly.
So these people are, to use an alt-right term, they are cucked, they are spineless. They need to stand up for themselves and take charge of their culture and their country again. And I think Modi is sort of infusing that sort of encouragement, that pride into people back again.
I think it's a
Be
very
proud
good
to
point.
be proud to be Indian again.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point.
And by the way, it's not without reason.
Sure.
Because India has seen very bad times in the past 50 years with a socialist government.
Yeah.
But after the economic liberalization, we are growing like anything.
Yeah.
And I hope the good times continue.
Yeah, so do I. Okay, speaking of socialism, there's a question from Kshitij Rampotra. I don't know if you have necessarily an answer for it, but he's wondering, why are so many communist politicians also devout Muslims? Aren't both ideologies fundamentally incompatible with each other?
I'm as clueless as you are, man. What does communism have to do with Islam?
Right? It's a weird
Yeah.
one, right?
There is nothing. I've read the Quran multiple times and nothing in there about communism.
Yeah.
No. I don't think these are connected. I think it's merely a coincidence.
Yeah, I
When
think
it
so.
when it comes to sort of the misguided altruism of communism, in Islam, if you want to talk about altruism and giving your money to help the other people, we have the concept of zakat, which is like I think 1/40th of your earnings. That's about it. Nothing more.
I think the idea is that communism as an ideology and Islam as an ideology are both looking to dominate, or are looking to be the big fish in the pond. You look at communism in Russia and in China, it looks to dominate. It doesn't want to just be a participant. It wants to be number one. So I think that's where some people can maybe find a bridge between the two ideologies.
Yeah, but it's a very loose connection. I think it's a mere coincidence.
Yeah, I think that's certainly
And
possible.
I have a similar question.
Sure.
Why are so many Bengalis communists? I mean, is there something in the water over there that turns people such leftists and communists? What is wrong with this place, man?
Dude, you need to come. You need to come to DU, and you need to hang out in DU for a bit, or you need to do like a stand-up show in DU somewhere. That's where you will see like the Bengali communist connection. It's kind of crazy. It's like almost everyone, not everyone, but pretty close, pretty damn close.
It's always a Bengali. It's always a Bengali.
It's kind of crazy. I think they were one of. I think that's where it kind of started, right? The Communist Party of India started in Bengal. Was started by a Bengali. So I think, they almost feel like they have a responsibility to carry the tradition on. I don't know. Okay, here's a good question from Rajendra Singh Chabra. Do you think that in stand-up scene also in the future there would be camps like there exist in the leftist comic camps, that in the comic camps in the US, that there would be sort of left comic camps and there would be more right-leaning or open-minded comic camps? Do you see that happening right now, or do you think that's something that might happen in the future?
It's happening right now, and it's about to get worse.
Really?
Because of cultural Marxism. Earlier, when I started in 2011, we had no concept of male comics or female comics. Now feminists have come in and they've created a rift. People are fighting like anything, and it came to a boiling point last year, the whole Me Too scandal in India, which started because of a stand-up comedian. The stand-up comedy scene was at the epicenter of all this because they were the idiots who were at the forefront of all this fake feminism and all that.
Right.
And I say it's about to get worse because of, I've heard two prominent Indian feminist comedians use this word, which really scared me: intersectionality. For those of you who don't know what that means, now they've divided comedians into male and female. Do you think they'll stop there? No.
Yeah, no.
Now the females have their own gang.
Yeah.
Now even in that gang, they'll be like the Savarna and the Dalits.
Yeah.
They'll create another division. Now all the Dalit female comedians or the Muslim female comedians, the minority female comedians, they have their own group.
Yeah.
Now it will be like straight and lesbian, straight and gay, LGBTQ. Again, they'll create another divide. And even among that, there'll be like trans and non-trans. And they'll keep dividing and dividing and dividing until we are nothing but a bunch of individuals squabbling with each other.
Right.
Yes, and this is going to happen. I've heard people talking about this.
To what extent do you think that's already the case right now?
Like I said, the gender relationships are really bad right now. It's all because of misunderstanding. And stand-up, by the way, let me tell you, it's traditionally it's a male-dominated field. It's just one of those guy things, like
it is even in
motorcycles
even in the US, where the stand-up scene is pretty old. Even in the US, I think it's mostly men involved in stand-up, right?
And there are certain biological, psychological reasons why women are not in stand-up. A woman, if you think of, has not much social incentive. I mean, there are scientific reasons behind why women are not so underrepresented in stand-up comedy. But hey, you're trying to discuss science with people who believe there are 76 genders.
That's true.
And they have the gall to say that right-wingers are unscientific. Have you guys taken a look in the mirror?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely insane. I think it's absolutely...
Me, man, for my part, I've always been very inclusive. You come to my venues, there's no girls allowed board over there. Anybody is welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why people watch comedy, right? Like that's why the thing is, like that's why I enjoy something like South Park. That's
Yeah.
why I enjoy something like a Family Guy, because there are really no boundaries in those two shows. You have no idea what that show is going to say next, you know. And
Yeah.
South Park, if you look at South Park, if you're like a social justice warrior and you're watching South Park, you're saying, "Oh, South Park is promoting the genocide of the Jews." That's what you're gonna come back and say, and that's not what it's doing. It's just a joke. It's taking a
PewDiePie is
stereotype.
doing that.
Exactly, exactly. PewDiePie is doing that. You're just taking a stereotype and you're making a joke out of it. That's how jokes work. That's why it's funny, because you take the stereotype and you make fun of it. That's why jokes are funny. And I think it's important I think it's important to understand that jokes are jokes, and I think it's important for
It's
people to
just a
just
joke.
yeah,
It's just a joke. Chill.
yeah. I think it's a really important one. All right, I'll tell you what. We'll end our today's discussion here. I
Okay.
want to make sure I don't want too much. I don't take too much of Emma's time. And again, Emma, thanks for doing this today, man. It was a really fun chat.
Thank you, man. It's a real pleasure talking to you. Really
Yeah.
glad we could have this discussion, and I hope we red pill some people through this.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, and,
That'll be
and
really
I'd
exciting.
love to have more discussions with you in the future. And I'm looking forward to watching more of your podcasts with the Chai with Red Pills as well. Guys, if you're not aware, I think you've recently done a podcast with BJP leader Tejasvi Surya as well, right?
Tejasvi Surya, yes.
So tell us a
What
little
a
bit about
guy.
that podcast, where we can send some people there.
We talked to him. Long story short, he's a classical liberal. He has all the right thoughts, right beliefs. I think he's a very bright young man, and I mean, so young and so accomplished. He's like 5 years younger than me, and he's already an MP candidate.
Right.
I got that feeling of what am I doing with my life? But very sweet guy, very open-minded, so humble and down to earth. Again, nothing like the demon that media says he is.
Right.
Damn nice guy. It's a real
Yeah.
pleasure talking.
So guys, go ahead and check out that video. It's on Ahmed Shariff's YouTube channel. Your YouTube channel is by the same name, right? Ahmed Shariff.
Yes, yes.
So it's by the same name, Ahmed Shariff, and you have Chai with Red Pills over there. Go make sure to go check it out. Again, Ahmed, thanks a lot for being in the show, man. It was really fun, and let's do it again sometime soon.
Thanks, man. Sure. Bye.
All right, guys, thanks again for watching today. I will see you guys for the next episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to subscribe, share the video, and I will see you for the next episode. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy. I'll see you guys soon.